Hello! Today I want to talk about how to incorporate fighting game mechanics into turn-based games. Now, the way that I got on this topic was actually way years ago. I played through like a Final Fantasy 1, 6 and 7. And in 6 and 7, they they got like the Black Belt class, right? Which is like based on the monk class from Dungeons and Dragons. And for whatever reason, well, I guess it's, I guess it is kind of like a good idea. They wanted to incorporate fighting game mechanics into these characters' abilities. And they didn't do a very good job of it. Because, well, it didn't really stick, did it? And that was like an interesting question. Because how would you do it then? Right? And also, why doesn't the monk in general just have fighting game mechanics? Or what even is the purpose of the monk class in D&D? And so I went down that rabbit hole, and really that has to be like a second video, because I was going to go through all the mechanics of the monk, but really let's just focus on how would you actually do it. You got these fighting game mechanics, you're like, let's spice up this turn-based game. We got like this kind of like fighting game, with black belt monk character. How do you do that? Well, then you're gonna also answer a question. How do you put like action game mechanics in turn-based games? Because fighting games are action games, and I got this idea to make like a full video explaining even like the real differences between turn-based and action, because it's actually very complex, and there's like a lot of layers to it, because you got turn-based, but you also have like dice rolls and random percentage, hit detection. But that's like a different conversation. It's also kind of part of this conversation. But first you gotta answer, well, what even is a fighting game? Because when we're talking about fighting games, we're specifically talking about like the 2D kinds, like the one-on-one fighting. You got special moves, combos. But then you got a question, well, how do you put fighting game mechanics in another action game, right? So we're going to talk about that too. But first, really, well, fighting games. Really, most games are about combat. You got combat in all sorts of games. Turn-based, that's combat. Shooter games, combat. 2D shooters like that's combat. Like even Metroid, Zelda, combat. It's just combat everything. So fighting games, the 2D kind with combos and stuff, it's just another form of combat. So, well, what is combat? Well, really, it's like a dance almost, because the idea is that you're trying to hit your opponent, but you don't want yourself to get hit. So you kind of have to like dance when it comes to threat range. Like you want to be able to get into range to hit them, but to do so also makes so they can hit you. So it's very much a risk reward. It's very important. You gotta have that risk reward factor. So if you attack, you've got like frame data. You get stuck in this animation, and if your opponent like blocks it or dodges it, they can jump over you or something, then they can attack you. So it's kind of like that's kind of like a samurai showdown where two sword fighters who are like super skilled are like just standing still, and neither of them wants to make the first move, because then they're vulnerable to the opponent's counterattack. Like let's say you have a really good counterattack. They're all both really good at deflecting. So, what's the easiest way to defeat your opponent? If they attack first and you deflect and then like counterattack them, right? So they're just standing like looking at each other, waiting for the other to make the first move. It's the same thing kind of happens with snipers. Like if you're a sniper, being able to headshot your opponent is really easy if they zoom in to try and headshot you. So, because when they're zoomed in, they can't jump, they can move that fast. So it's against that risk-reward thing. And this thing, well, that's exactly what happens in first-person shooters as well, right? Because in general, well, you can't really, if you're behind cover, you can't really see your opponent unless, in a third-person shooter you can. And that kind of gets really awkward when both sides are standing behind the wall and they can see each other, but they can't shoot each other. And to even get out from cover makes you vulnerable to your opponent. So just kind of get stuck. But in a first-person shooter, your crosshair, the middle of your screen, is where your attack comes out, right? But your hitbox is like bigger. So if you're standing like half behind like a wall, your opponent can hit you. So it's like, yeah, it's safe, but also you can't see anything, and it's like the downside. So you gotta come out in the open and look. You gotta be able to see your opponents, but then they can shoot you. And yeah, you can like lob grenades or something, but it's like blind fire. You know, you can set traps. There are ways, but again, it's that risk-reward thing where you gotta do that dance. You gotta get in the threat level. You gotta take that risk. Same thing happens in turn-based games, because in turn-based, sure, like in action game, it's possible not to get hit, right? If you're really good. In turn-based, it's expected that you get hit. You know, health is more like a resource, so you're managing that resource. So the idea then is, well, really in any combat game, you need offensive options and defensive options. So in something like Pokemon, your defensive option is like switching out, right? Like in a fighting game, it's blocking, and so blocking always has to be really quick, right? So then if your opponent blocks, you can react to them, but the downside is you can't really move while blocking, and you can get grabbed or stuff, so there's like downsides to that, right? So again, like in Pokemon, you want to hit your opponent with super effective attacks, but you want to take as many resisted hits as possible, right? You want to take as many immune hits. So you got to switch out your Pokemon so that you take the resisted hits, and then when your opponent switches out their Pokemon to try and take a resisted hit from you, you actually use a coverage move that's good against the new Pokemon comes in. You gotta predict that, or you apply some status, do stuff like that. That's kind of how you gotta see it. It's all combat is all about offensive options and defensive options. This is the same across like pretty much any fighting and any like combat game. You know, so you got like something like Dark Souls where people say, oh yeah, Souls like, you know, that's like when you have a dodge roll with invincibility frames. And it's like, no, that's because it's a combat game. Dark Souls has combat. You need defensive options, so shield, parry, dodge rolls, you know, that sort of stuff also happens in Super Smash Bros. Ultimate, right? You know, got shields, dodge roll with like invincibility frames, way more invincibility frames, right? And you also got like a parry. Combat. Okay, so you got all that. Now the question is, what makes fighting games special then? Because if you want to put fighting game mechanics in your turn-based game, what mechanics are we talking about there? Well, some people think that it's inputs, and inputs are an interesting topic when it comes to those fighting games. Because, well, really, like, inputs are there so that you can have more moves than you have buttons, right? Because fighting games, they use, like, 4 buttons, 6 buttons, just for punching and kicking and stuff. So it's like, you know, it uses up a lot of buttons, but if you've got inputs, you know, you can kind of have infinite inputs. You can have, like, 6 special moves on top of that, right? But also, it's kind of like a balancing factor. In general, when it comes to moves, if a special move is like 50% more powerful, you want to make it twice as difficult to input. Because if it's only 50% more difficult, then it becomes like mandatory. Where like, if you're a really skilled player, yeah, you should be rewarded for having more skill, but not by too much where it's like the weaker players just have no chance. Right? It's like, oh, I know the secret input, so I can just kill you in 2 hits. And it's kind of interesting in Smash Brothers where you got like the fighting game characters, where you can do like up special with Ryu, but if you do the input, it's like 20% strong. It's like 18 or 20%. Not a lot really. But then again, it's also not really that hard to input in those games. Like especially with Ryu and Ken, like sometimes the special moves just come out on their own when you didn't mean to, and you end up killing yourself. Yeah, actually Sakurai even did a video on that, and he thinks they could even be stronger. Yeah, no, because like again, like they're not that hard to input. There's actually a little trick to it that nobody tells you, but you know, I'll tell you about it in some other like video. Because actually, when I found it out, it was like I was kind of like mad because it's like way easier. You know, you're thinking like, oh, fighting games are really difficult because they have these really difficult inputs, like the Shoryuken inputs. No, it's actually really easy if you know the trick. But I'm not gonna tell you yet because it's a secret. I'm keeping the secret. I've joined the cult. But no, really, like that's kind of the idea of like inputs. But that's not really fun, you know, because it's like, what are we gonna do? We're gonna have like a turn-based game with some moves need inputs. That's stupid. That's basically what Final Fantasy VI did, though. No, really, they did that. They did. They actually did that. But no, the thing that makes fighting games different from other kind of combat games are combos. Combos, specifically the kind that juggle your opponent, right? Because even like Dark Souls, you can kind of do combos. Like I had this one combo where, you know, I think if you had the Drake sword and you had those like those three guys, you know, in the forest. If I did like 2 light attacks and a heavy attack, I had just enough stamina that combo would take him out. Now if I did 3 light attacks, then my stamina would be gone and they wouldn't be dead yet. They would need like a 4th attack. So that was like a pretty good combo because it could like stun lock them as well, right? So that's nice. But there's not really enough moves in Dark Souls to like go through with that. But you know, that's a thing. You know, you stun lock them. You know, like they're in hit stun. You're able to go for another attack. Okay. But really, what fighting games what makes them so special is they really have a lot of moves, right? So many moves. And these moves are all better in like certain situations. They all have different knockback, different frame data. And the art is using the right moves at the right time to get this crazy combo. Even like, it doesn't even have to be a true combo. You can even like call out your opponent like they do like an air dodge. And you're like, oh, I predict that. And then I hit them with this other move, right? So really, you kind of got like 2 kinds of moves. And you got like in between 2, but you got light moves and heavy moves. Yeah, so the light attacks have really good frame data. They have very short startup. They don't have very little end lag. So if you hit your opponent, you can like hit them right after. You can hit like another one. They're very safe, so if you hit their shield or something, you don't take that many minus frames, right? Now the second thing that's really good is they don't have that much knockback. So your opponent doesn't get hit that far away. So you can do more follow-up attacks, right? Again, really good. Now I think that's all the... Wait, did I write them down? Maybe I should have written them down. What upside one or worse? Well, whatever. Downsides is, well, first you're not dealing a lot of damage, right? Other problem is you're not dealing that much like shield damage. And you're not hitting them with that much hit stun. That's another thing. So it's like very quick, but they can move sort of fast. So you really got to keep up the pressure. So if you hit them even like slightly too far away, you kind of can't follow up. And you got to go like a really long string. And you probably need to still like move towards them. So this kind of tight. Now, heavy attacks. Oh yeah, another downside is they tend to not have that much range. Right? Heavy attacks are, of course, upside is they're very strong. So they do way more damage. Nice. They do hit opponents farther away, so it's best to use them at the end of a combo. They have more reach. They have more hit stun. Right? So if you do hit them, it's like you get a lot more time to maybe follow up. But they're also like way slower. And if you hit their shield, you know, they tend to do more shield damage or maybe shield pushback. So if you hit them, maybe they get like pushed back so they can't retaliate immediately. But in general, they are very unsafe. They're very dangerous because your opponent just like avoids them. Then they can just like land on you with an aerial and you're just kind of screwed, right? Now, depending on the hit stun, like or the knockback, you know, if they get sent like straight up, that's pretty good because they can like fall down immediately, so they're like in range again. Like especially if you've got like a meteor move in like Smash Brothers, where it's like, you know, Captain Falcon stomp, where they just get and then they come down and you get hit for like a knee. So those are like your 2 types of attacks, and you combo those into each other. You know, you put them like in a string of light attacks, and then you end with like a heavy attack, right? So that's the kind of thing you want to put into your... You kind of want to translate it into your turn-based game or into another action game. You really gotta have that knockback, that juggling. That's what you're gonna have. Putting them in a position where they kind of just screwed, it's kind of funny because like competitive players will even talk about turns. It's really weird. They'll talk about turns because the thing is, If you're in a combo, it's not your turn. It's not your turn to attack. You have to be defensive. Because when your opponent hits you, you're in hit stun. And sure, you can try to using an attack, but your opponent's going to have the frame advantage. So, and this again by like blocking is like really quick. It's like frame 1. Because then it allows you to like escape like a non-true combo. You know, air dodging, all that stuff has to be frame 1. If you choose the wrong option though, you know, if you air dodge the wrong way, or you don't block like if you block low instead of like blocking high, and then you get hit again. So it's like, it's really quick, but you got to pick the right option, right? So it's not your turn. It's only once your opponent it's only once you've blocked an attack, like a heavy attack specifically, where the opponent has so many minus frames that you can just retaliate. And then it's your turn. So it is kind of like that. There is kind of like a concept of turns, weirdly enough, in like those games. Okay, so you want to put this in your action game. Okay, well, let's look at an example where this happens. One of those is Doomfist in Overwatch, right? Now, Doomfist in Overwatch worked pretty well. Except it didn't really. It worked well. It looked like it worked well. But ultimately, it didn't work well. And which is why they in Overwatch 2, they turned him into a tank. So what happened? Well, the problem is, really like a 5v5 or 6v6 like first-person shooter game is a completely different environment than a one-on-one fighting game, right? One of those things is, well, health pools. In a fighting game, you've got like a really big health bar, right? In fact, like, so if you get comboed, you can generally survive a combo, unless it's a really hardcore, unless the player who's doing the combo is really good and can call out all your defensive options. You know, if it's a true combo that is like, kills you like in one go, that's kind of the thing that needs to be patched. It's like Kazuya level, right? Where you just like electric wind God fists you into oblivion, like just keep on after each other and then just do a true combo like that. And that's the kind of thing that gets patched. Because I've been looking, I'm keeping like an eye on like Mortal Kombat 1's balance a bit. And basically, any combo that does more than 50% of a health bar gets nerfed. The idea is, you should be able to survive 2 huge combos. Right, so then, you know, you don't have to always use your break. You can use your break like once per round. But you basically need to be able to survive 2 of those huge combos, and then still like have a little bit of health left to like retaliate. That's like fair. It gives players a chance, right? So, yeah, and then also there's in other Mortal Kombat games, there were things like max damage, where once a combo hit max damage, it didn't deal any more damage. And even now they've got like things where like, if you're in a really long combo, like the damage gets like, it gets reduced. Like on like 50%, it can go all the way down to like 50%, I don't know specifics. But that's kind of it, like, it's like, we don't want players to die in one combo. That brings us to Overwatch. Here, characters have like, what, 200 health sometimes? You know, tank has like 500. A lot of characters only have like 300. That's a problem. Because in a fighting game as well, there's like two, you gotta win 2 rounds, right? You know, so like your health bar gone, poof, round over, next round. 2 rounds, game's over, right? In Overwatch, you die a lot. Like characters can die like 20 times or 30 times in rounds. So it's a lot more expected to like die, which is why they have lower health. You know, like they're meant to die a lot. Kinda. Okay. But that means that combos, you don't need that long of a combo. So like comboing is almost like pointless. Like if a Widowmaker headshots your Tracer, is that a combo? No, it's not necessary really. So to be in a combo, you're being juggled. So you can't move. Now you can have like a movement ability that gets you out of there. You can have like some kind of defensive ability. Okay. That's nice, but if that's not off, that's off cooldown, you know, it's a second and you're dead. 1 second. Because you're in the combo for a second, because then you die. The combo is not that long. You don't have that much health. You die in a second. You have a second to escape. So this isn't like in Mortal Kombat where every time you hit you get a little bit of meter and eventually your breaker fills, so you're like, oh, I'm gonna break out now. No, like if you're if you're on cooldown, if your abilities are on cooldown, you're screwed. Unless your teammates come in and help. Okay, that's nice. What if the enemy team helps the Doomfist and like the Widowmaker shoots you while you're in the combo? Like, now the Doomfist doesn't even need to kill you himself. Someone else is gonna do it. Okay, that kind of sucks. Second problem. Second problem is first-person shooter characters don't have that many moves. Fighting game characters have a lot of moves. They have, like Ryu. Like you're thinking, oh, these guys are fighters. They're all doing like close-ranged fights, right? They're all like in each other's face. No, even like close-range fighters have projectiles. They kind of poke enemies out, because some enemies, like, if Ryu is fighting a guy who's even more aggressive than him, he likes to keep him at like an arm's length, right? Kind of poke people out. They have like pokes. They have shield breakers. They have low attacks, high attacks, anti-airs. There's also characters who just like, camping and just throwing projectiles. In that case, like Ryu actually wants to get in. He wants to use like some kind of move that absorbs like a projectile, and then he can like move in. So it's like, oh, a rocket is being shot at me. I'm gonna do down B. I'm gonna take the hit, and I'm gonna move forward. Okay. Now that all makes sense because they're on their own. They basically need to do everything on their own. Meanwhile, if you're in a team, it is expected that some things you can do. Doomfist is a close-range fighter. He's not good at long range. That's what Widowmaker is for, right? Really, it's like if you're playing like Skyrim or Fallout, your character can lockpick. He can sneak, he can cast spells, he can do everything. He can do everything as well, but it's called skill-based, right? They have all these skills, and you put points to your skills. In Dungeons & Dragons, a fighter can lockpick. He can become like, he can multi-class maybe, like dual class, maybe he can put, depending on his class, he can put some points into it. But that's not the point. The point is, you've got your thief teammate. He does the lockpicking. That's his job. Because you're a team. You gotta work together. You can't all do everything on your own. Like a bard can do everything, kinda. But still things are like blocked off from him. The high level wizard spells, he doesn't get that. He doesn't get like all the thief abilities. It's blocked off. So the more characters you have, the more divided the roles are. Kinda, and that's how you get like MMO stuff, where you just have DPS, tank, heal, where the tank, like in something like Dungeons & Dragons or Pokemon, is a character that can both deal massive damage and take a lot of damage. In an MMO, a tank just takes damage and draws aggro. The DPS, like, they just distracts so that the DPS can do their attack thing. Because you got like a raid battle, you got like 100 players. Well, you have 100 players, each of them can only do one thing. Okay, that's basically how it comes down. So you got this shooter game, which is team-based. Doomfist, he can only go into close range. That's all he can do. And this is kinda the problem that ends up happening. So, Doomfist, he's only got like 4 attacks. That's like pretty much nothing. And each of these attacks, it was kind of limited, right? Each of them could only do like one thing. Like the combo was very specific. Because what he had an uppercut, which would hit people into the air and do damage. Okay, well, there was also kind of like a movement ability. He could like get up to places. Okay, good, because you really need to like, in order to do these combos, every ability needs to do multiple things, right? Then he had the slam, where he would like go forward and slam down. And this has a lot of range, so that was like his main movement. He could uppercut in the air and then like make a lot of space. He could like go very far forward and would slam, would slow enemies, and it would also kind of knock them up a little bit. Okay, so that did a lot as well. Then he also had the fist punch. This thing he had to charge up, and it would knock enemies away. And depending on how much charge it did more damage. It would knock enemies into other enemies, into walls. Okay. He also had this like in-hand like in a shotgun, which like would reload on its own. And that's like his main attack. Then he had his ultimate, which like just an escape, or like if he wants to go in. Okay, so each of these abilities did multiple things. Ultimately, the combo, the kind of routine you went into, because it's kind of like in Paladins, you had this too, where you had all these loadout cards, and basically it went like kind of like this, where one ability, if you hit your opponent with one ability, you'd have this loadout card that if you hit them with this ability, another ability would go, its cooldown would be reduced. And then the second ability, you'd had a card that reduced the third ability. And the third ability reduced the cooldown of the first ability. So you kind of went into this loop. Doomfist had kind of the same thing, where the combo was slam in, you are no high ground. You look at your victim, like some squishy like support character, right? You slam in, then they kind of like get knocked up, so they can move. Now you do your uppercut, which knocks them up even higher. Then you shotgun, because now you can just shotgun the shit out of them, because they can't really move at all. So hitting them was kind of easy, depending, well, if you're a good Doomfist player, you could. And then once they were dead, you just turn around and rocket punch away. That's it. You just use it as an escape. This was the combo. Problem. This is where the problem came in, right? This character's entire thing, every single ability was made to be part of a combo, right? So, if Doomfist was caught with like one of his abilities on cooldown, he was kind of screwed. He couldn't really be in the middle of the fight at all. He needed to have, his abilities need to be off cooldown. Like a character like Ryu doesn't have that problem. He just needs to have a cooldown on his like Hadouken, right? He always has access to those. So Doomfist thing was, I'm gonna wait around for all my abilities to be off cooldown, and I'm gonna target a guy, I'm gonna slam in, boom, do my little combo, dead, get out. That's what you do. That's what you do every time. Every single time, that's what he did. That was his combo. And his combo needed to be consistent. It needed to be very consistent, because it was the only thing he could do. Because he couldn't really do anything else. So they even dealing damage gave him temporary shields. To kind of protect him, because when you're doing your little combo, you're of course vulnerable. Because it takes time to do the combo. Like a second or two, okay. But then you can get shot during that time. Your opponent, the guy you're trying to combo, is shooting you. And of course, he was never really going to do this on tanks. Because tanks are tanky. They don't die from like his little combo. His combo is too short. It doesn't have enough hits in it in order to take out a tank. Also, tanks tend to not get knocked up that high. Also, tanks are very good at this close range. And they have shields that they can just like pull up, like really the only characters that are worth comboing are characters who are completely screwed if they're caught on their own. So we get this like bullying thing, where he's just assassinating this one character over and over and over, and it works, right? Like you assassinate the most dangerous guy at that moment, and then they're a character down, and now like you're still a character up, because they like need time to respawn. That's less time that it takes for Doomfist to reload to wait for his cooldowns. So by the time he's done, he can just go back in. He can help finish him off. It's the only thing he did. It was the only thing. It needed to be consistent. It was the only thing he could do, so it had to be good. So it just turns into this like catch-22, where you got this combo character who works. He certainly is comboing people, but it's not creative. Your opponent can't do anything about it, because they don't have any fighting game mechanics to stop it. They don't have a breaker. They don't have any of that. They don't even have like a block. That'd be like the one thing they could have. They don't have it. So it kind of just fell through. So they turned him into tank, and that was it. And the story, But the funny thing is there was another first-person shooter class-based game that actually did combo characters kind of right, which was Team Fortress 2. Yeah. Now it didn't do it. Okay, so there kind of are two combo characters in TF2, right? Other characters can maybe kind of do it. The demo man, he may be able to like put like a sticky trap down, and then like have like the Scottish resistance. He can use like a second sticky trap in the air, and he might be able to knock him up with the first detonation and explode with the second. The grenade launch can kind of do knockback. Really, the two characters that could do combos were the Pyro and the Soldier. Then the Pyro, his combo was, it was a combo, yes, but it was a lot more like, kind of like the kind of combos you see in Pokemon, where it's like, oh, if your opponent is poisoned, this attack deals double damage. Kinda. He also could knock people back with his Air Blast, but really like you had the combo consisted of this one flamethrower called the Degreaser. The Degreaser, its entire purpose was giving him better frame data. Because what it did was it reduced the time it would take to switch between weapons by 65%, which was a lot. The downside was Afterburn only dealt 1 damage per tick. So usually Pyro's Afterburn is very strong. Like over time it deals like, I don't know, like 100 damage maybe? 75? Now it dealt like 20 damage if you're lucky. So that was like the big downside. Now this weapon, they eventually nerfed it to deal. It also did like 10% less damage, and eventually also make it like cost more air blast. They increased its cost by 25% for air blasting, which was good because you were air blasting with this thing a lot. Because the combo started with you walking up to an enemy, running up to them, you're kind of like ambushing them, and then air blasting them into a corner. And that's while also like lighting them on fire. Because then when they were air blasted, they also nerfed air blast in general, where you could like move more now. But the combo was, now that it's in the corner, they're on fire. You can now hit them with either one of three weapons, and those weapons were the flare gun, the reserve shooter, and the extinguisher. Except for the flare gun, all of these got nerfed because they were too strong. But the flare gun, that one was just fine. Yeah, now really they should have just gone and nerfed the Degreaser. But you can still kind of do this with like the base flamethrower. But okay, so you got the flare gun. The flare gun just deals critical damage against burning players. Like it deals 90 damage. Yeah, 90. So a regular hit does 30 damage. The critical hit 90. Okay. So basically, if you flamethrower them first and then airblasting them into a corner, pretty much together with the flamethrower damage, that's like 125 damage. You could kill a scout, you could kill a sniper, spy, engineer, all of those. Any other character, it was called the Puff and Sting combo actually. It's the only combo really we're doing because the other two were nerfed, right? This combo is really good. Flare gun is also really good at long range. It just kills low health enemies. So just like the Doomfist, we kind of got this. It's the same kind of issue where any kind of like, well, a heavy you can still kind of like pester with flare gun shots, where you just like go behind the wall and then just shoot the flare gun and just hit him with 90 damage over and over. But yeah, any kind of like low health character, if you got the ambush on them, they were pretty much dead. So annoying. Then we got the reserve shooter. The reserve shooter was a shotgun which dealt mini crits to enemies in the air. That was the original one, and it only had 3 shots back then. So even jumping counted at first. The soldier also had this weapon, but then they nerfed it so that it only hits enemies. It only mini crits enemies that are in the air because of air blasts or rocket blasts. So if a soldier is rocket jumping, you could try hitting them with mini crit damage, but this is a shotgun. It didn't really need more precision, like more accuracy. So you could maybe try like sniping them, because mini crits also ignore like fall off damage. That did not happen, ever. But yeah, same thing, same combo really. Air blast them into the air, shotgun, boom, mini crit damage. So yeah, again, they couldn't really dodge this at all. Like the scout could like double jump, but if you caught this double jump with another air blast, they were done. So the reserve shooter did pretty good. If you got like the meat shot, pretty much same damage. Didn't need to like light them on fire, but may as well. You can also hit enemies that are in the water. It's just a shotgun. It also got like buffed by like one like what you could have. It had one more shot in it, one more ammo in the clip. Okay. Now, eventually, like pretty much the competitive player base Well, like they complained and like, oh, it was too strong or something, because God forbid, pyro is good in like competitive a little bit, right? So it also got nerfed, where it only works against like blasts from like explosives. Okay, so now the pyro has no use for it, unless he reflects a projectile like a rocket, and then hits the enemy at their feet, and then does like then takes out the reserve shooter. Now I play against bots, right? Like I'll go for this. I'll try going for this. It's not worth it because like the shots need to be so accurate. You need to get all pellets of the shotgun blast need to hit them, and you need to be pretty close anyway. Even if you like walk up and then like stand below them, they tend to like land before they've died, and then once that happens, it's just a regular shotgun blast. Thing is, it would often happen where like I would run out of ammo, so I actually found that the regular shotgun, you may as well just use the regular shotgun. The mini crit damage only like 30% more. Yeah, so just use the regular shotgun because you have more shots. Just shoot them more often. It's actually better. Now the soldier can still kind of use it if because he can like shoot enemies at their feet and then like blast them up. He can kind of still do that. I use the reserve shooter together with the Liberty launcher and the Market Garner, because Liberty launcher has more rockets. It reduces rocket jump damage. It's actually like a set. It's actually a set together with like a little hat that does absolutely nothing. It's kind of for thematics. It's not good. It's bad. But you can technically, sometimes you get that mini crit, and it's like, yeah, I mini crit them. It's really bad. The reserve shooter is useless now. The final weapon, that was part of the combo now, that was possible with the combo, was actually a melee weapon, the extinguisher. The extinguisher got butchered. Butchered like no other item in any like sort of like first-person shooter ever got butchered. Initially, it just dealt critical hits against burning enemies. Just 100% crits against burning enemies. Really good. Like 195 damage, that's like the crit. Really good. Could kill anything that wasn't a soldier or a heavy. Even a heavy, you just light them on fire, you kind of air blast them in the corner, and 2 hits if they don't have the minigun revved up, they're kind of dead. Okay, now it did deal reduced damage against non-burning players. So if an enemy was in the water, you were screwed. Against other pyros, also kind of like, if you also had like the flare gun, you really just could not deal with pyros or with people in the water. You just couldn't. You could still flamethrower the pyros. Okay, that was it, right? The extinguisher was a little bit too good. It really was. Like it was just way too fun. Actually, like getting closer. It was dangerous to get that close in, but it was pretty good. Then they nerfed it. The nerf was entirely fair. What they did was, if you hit them in the back and they're burning, then it's a crit. If you hit in the front and they're burning, mini crit. Perfectly fair. It was a weapon that was. It's not the kind of thing you always had on you, but if you had it with you, you may as well go for it. If you can go for it, it was really good. If you hit them, like lighting them on fire, usually they turn around, so it kind of sucked. But just kind of like always like a teammate thing. Like your teammate pyro lights on fire and then you sneak behind them. That was always like the point, kind of. Okay. Then for some reason they decided to nerf it again. This time into the ground, where you don't know what they were thinking, but it was like, oh, equipping it, like it's 60% slower to switch to it. Something like that. So and even then, they instead of like 50% damage against non-burning players, it was just 33% damage penalty. Even if you crit them. Just your crits were just like, oh, it's like 130 damage or something. Whoop-de shit. And it was super slow, and it's like, it just sucked. And then they changed it again, so then now, depending on how long they've been burning, or if you kill them, you get a crit. If you hit them, it crits them, but it also extinguishes them. And if you get the kill, you get a speed boost. So if you hit them and they don't die, it's like you have to like relight them up. It's so inconvenient. It sucked. Yeah, so it just completely destroyed. The combo was gone. So now the only combo there was left was the flare gun combo. That one still worked fine. So, like, what's even the point in the whole thing, right? Because the extinguisher is just like a flare gun, basically. Okay, but now combo pyro is kind of like done. He's just kind of done. It was never really that great of a combo anyway, because it was a little bit too straightforward, I guess. Really the problem with pyro is that there wasn't a very good identity for him. Really, the pyro is more I think should be more of a defensive class. Because you're like, what does the pyro do well? Well, he air blasts. He air blasts Ubers away, air blasts projectiles away, air blasts stickies away, pushes enemies, the crowd control, really. Like he spy checks, he can remove sappers maybe, extinguish teammates, all very defensive, supportive stuff, really. That's probably better. Like, you should really have had a flamethrower that was like defensive, but no, all the flamethrowers he gets are all offensive. Like the stock flamethrower is only like even remotely defensive one. But, it's the only one that doesn't have a nerfed air blast, which is really sad. And I guess air blast is really OP though, so maybe like a longer range one that isn't like it doesn't add a penalty to the air blast. That could be cool. Like just one that deals less damage but has longer range. Oh, whatever. But really, the real combo character was the soldier. Now, why is that? Well, he's got the reserve shooter. Okay, but the real combo is the direct hit. The direct hit it's the perfect combo weapon. Now, why is that? Well, what it does is it's a skill-based weapon. That's very important. It takes a lot of skill to use, which Doomfist, like his attacks had very wide range, so hitting enemies really was easy. So the combo was super consistent, but that's all he had. The direct hit is not consistent. The combo is very very niche. Not something to go for at all times. But it is like just using it regularly is still good. You don't have to go for the combo for it to be effective at killing people. Because what it does, as the name implies, it deals increased damage, like 30% more or something, 25% more, but its explosion radius is very small. So if they are in explosion radius, it still does a lot of damage because it's like there's explosion fall off. So the farther away you are from the center, the less damage you take. But the explosion is so small, you're probably going to take like very high damage anyway. So you hit them directly. You have to hit them directly, and then that's like a shit ton of damage. Like at close range, it even like just one shots like 125 health classes, which kind of bullshit. Especially when the soldier is wearing like his gunboat, so he takes like no damage from the blast. Pretty bullshit. Meanwhile, the lock and load wasn't allowed to one shot. Whatever. It also has increased projectile speed, like 70%. So people kind of joke that it's like a hit scan weapon. It's still a projectile, but it moves so fast, so enemies really can't dodge it. So if you hit with it, it's probably intentional. So again, very skill based. Like if you get hit with it, you can't really call bullshit. Sometimes you can, like maybe a soldier just shoots at one guy, it slightly misses, barely, and he hits another one. Okay, that sucks. But again, the explosion radius is so small that it really needs to. It is very lucky if it hits you on accident, right? Now another thing it had is it mini crit enemies that were in the air because of blast damage. So if you rocket jumped, like straight up and he hits you out of the air, you got like annihilated. Because it's 25% damage and then another 30%, like with no fall off from range, because the mini crit, crazy. But the killer here is, in TF2, the way that knockback works is that damage increases knockback. Knockback is already, you can increase knockback, like they can like put like a modifier on a weapon to increase knockback, but damage also effectively increases knockback. So the direct hit, if you hit them at their feet, they would go into the air. So if you did that, if you went for the feet and you blast them up, which you're gonna specifically aim for the feet, you could just air shot them, and it was a combo. Like they do, you hit them at the feet, they take a bunch of damage. You hit them in the air, boom. Just most of them, done. Scout, he can like jump away. Pyro can maybe air blast. Medic maybe can Uber. But it will sometimes happen, where even if you're playing against bots, where you look in the corner of your eye, a bot gets blown into the air by some other soldier, and you just look over and pew! You can just do that. And it's kind of genius, right? Because even if you're not going for the combo, this weapon's pretty good, because the Heavy's the one character who, he doesn't die from just hitting him twice. But also he doesn't get knocked up that high. So really, with him, you're better off just shooting him directly. Just go for the stomach, Just shoot like 4 rockets at the stomach, and he's done. Well, unless he gets healed, but that's what you gotta shoot goo. But even like without going for the combo, this weapon's still good, because it has range. It's not like Doomfist, where you have to be in melee range. No, this thing can poke enemies out. It can just still destroy sentries. It can just like shoot at a scout and just kill him. If you're at close range, kill him instantly. You can do that. And it's all in one weapon. So the soldier still has a secondary, which can be a shotgun. It can be like a buff banner. He can still buff his teammates. He can float through the air with like the base jumper. He can like reduce his own rocket jump damage, and he still has a melee. He still have the escape plan, disciplinary action. He's got more stuff to do. The combo isn't the only thing he does. So we got this weapon here that combos. It's a combo. It has that ability, but it's not something he's gonna do all the time. So if you get hit by it, it's skill. So it's like you can be that. It doesn't happen that often. Even like casual matches, soldiers can't just go around pounding noobs with this combo. And even why would you? Because you can just shoot them with direct hits. There's like 4 rockets. So there's no cooldown. You can just reload. And it only takes like 2 rockets to do the combo, really. If a teammate blasts someone up, that's just one of your rockets. You can just shoot at it. Boom. So that's really how you gotta use it in like a first-person shooter. It has to be like one weapon. So really, again with knockback, fighting games all about like applying knockback to enemies. So just give a character a weapon that has the ability to knock back them, but also does like increased damage when they've been hit in the air. Okay, there's a combo. Or like, even if you want to go like the status route, and like it's like, oh, just have a gun that has some kind of secondary fire that lights them on fire, and then just hit them with like an attack that does increase damage against enemies that are on fire. Maybe, you can do that.